Hello and welcome to ThePrint. I'm Sharan Puvarna, joining from Bengaluru. And Karnataka has announced a ban on social media use for children under the age of 16. And on the same day, the neighboring Andhra Pradesh has also said that it plans to introduce similar restrictions on youngsters and their usage of social media. The announcements have sparked a nationwide debate, but many questions, of course, remain unanswered. How will such a ban actually work? Who will enforce it? And what does it mean for young users online? To discuss this, we are joined by two very special guests, Apar Gupta, lawyer and co-founder of the Internet Freedom Foundation, and Priyanka MB, a Bengaluru-based psychologist and founder of the Inspiron Psychological Wellbeing Center. Vrinda Tulshan, my colleague from Delhi, also joins us on this important discussion. So we'll start with you, Apar. If you can just, try and tell us this is now, and they've used very strong words like we will ban social media usage. Uh, is this legally tenable? How does one enforce this?
Thank you so much for having me on this show. Uh, while I'll be happy to answer questions with respect to the legality of the proposal, also happy to chat about its public policy implications. In terms of the law which is being proposed as per the budget speech of the Karnataka Chief Minister, I went through the speech itself, and there's just one paragraph, paragraph 118, which says due to screen and smartphone addiction, which is the purpose which is being cited, there'll be a ban on social media. There is a lack of details as to what qualifies as social media, and this does become somewhat contentious, given that some platforms are understood by us to be social media in their ordinary use, such as Instagram, but sometimes messaging platforms or hybrid based functionality, for instance, even YouTube, may be classified as social media, but to some other people, it may serve an educational purpose. Secondly, how do you restrict it? Do you require those platforms themselves to uh, estimate the age of restriction, which is specified in the law as 16? There's no law right now. But is it inferential, or is it on the basis of declaration by each user? What is their age? And a lot of this does require technical implementation. And if it is left up to the platforms, there is a risk that either it may end up with everyone having to link their government issued IDs, or the platform itself on the basis of the user data, inferencing what is the age of the user on their platform, right? And while it is being attempted in Australia, I just like to highlight that the Australian law was preceded by 2 years of technical studies, as well as piloted by a dedicated e-safety commissioner's office, and this may not be present in India. So basically, even I don't have the details how it will be done. Finally, just like to add, the Information Technology Act as well as digital regulation is primarily vested with the union government, because posts, telegraphs, broadcasting, it has that power under the Indian constitution because it's there in the union list. And while health is sanitation, those are entries in the state list, I think so. Entry 7, and the state can make laws usually primarily which are governing any kind of telecommunication, any kind of exchange of information, are primarily regulated by the union government, also to ensure there's a consistent application of the law across the different states in India. And I do see this as one of the other objections which is supposed to come in. What happens to those districts which are adjoining Karnataka and the other states? Is it geographically imposed? And that's also another big question. So I have more questions than I have answers at present.
Because they use the word ban. Okay, they're not saying restrict. And we personally asked the chief minister, at least I did, ask Mr. Sidramaya his plans on how he plans to go about this and implement it. They're saying that now they will work up the guidelines and draft the guidelines and everything. So you said that there were similar studies, or rather, the Australian law was preceded by nearly 2 years of research. Now, in a country like India, you also raised one particular point that, link your Aadhaar. That, of course, adds to a whole new problem. So, do you think that states that have been saying this, including Andhra and several other states, they've been talking about the rising social media addiction and other things, the challenges are far more than how easily it can be implemented?
I would definitely agree with it, and I'm not reducing the problem which exists with social media as well, and the toxic media ecology which surrounds people, the impacts on mental health, which to some extent are being demonstrated through scientific studies, but most of them have been conducted abroad. My points are that such a ban may impact young people very differently across socio-economic groups, across gender, across caste. We already have very differentiated statistics for usage between men and women, and quite often young women may be prevented from accessing a smartphone itself on the grounds that social media is banned. I am aware of studies or experiences of people who work in the civil society sector who, in fact, have run specific programs for women to have internet access and to be on social media. And these include adolescent girls, because quite often they then get to also resist the patriarchal pressure towards marriage. They get to choose what they want to do in those formative years. So it is a complex issue. There are real harms due to social media use. There are also certain benefits which accrue to people, and these are uneven depending on the person who's using it. It depends on their age. Here, I think we do need a greater amount of scrutiny of social media platforms, their design choices, penalties need to be imposed, interoperability needs to come in, and I'd like to also tell, let's just let people know that Internet Freedom Foundation was the one of the parties which complained to the Competition Commission, which led to a very huge fine on WhatsApp. I, in my own capacity, have filed a shareholder activist resolution with Meta Platforms again to ensure it does a human rights impact assessment in India. Having done all of that, I'm saying this from a very deep form of concern that young people may be disenfranchised not only from social media but large parts of the internet if such a ban is made in order to address a moral panic that what is happening to young people. Young people also facing a shortage of employment opportunities. They deal with a degrading environment which threatens their health. We need to focus on many other things. For instance, the fact situation in which three young girls from Ghaziabad committed suicide, the facts of this case are shocking. These girls did not go to school since the pandemic. Where are child protection care officers? How it's easier to blame social media, it's easier to bring in a ban. I think we are really failing our youth, and social media is a part of it, but it won't fix everything by banning it.
Okay. I'd like to now come into you, Priyanka. So, Priyanka, for starters, for us to understand, some of us journalists are also probably, we use social media just as much for our work, and maybe it's not just a problem with youngsters; it's definitely a problem with adults as well. So, as psychologists, what are the symptoms of this particular addiction, and how does one identify this?
Yes, it's not just the young, it's also the adults, and we're constantly in this battle about its usage. So I agree with you. But coming back, is it about the ban or is it about learning how to use it responsibly across ages? Right? That's a very important question that we want to ask ourselves. Are we being responsible? Are we regulated? If not, what are the different kinds of signs and symptoms that you're going to see? To start with, the need for validation. It becomes like this reward mechanism when you start using the digital world. Did I get the like? Did I get the share? Did I get the comment? And it actually functionally changes the brain's mechanism, which means it takes a hit on your dopamine level, which is nothing but your brain's reward system. Now, if that is impacted, it also impacts your prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain that's responsible for decision making, problem solving, creative thinking. So, when these areas are impacted, what are the signs you're going to see? The need for validation, low self esteem, sleep disturbances. It's also looked upon in the adolescent age. Almost 30% of those who are dependent on social media have signs of depression, anxiety, stress, body dysmorphic disorders. But also, if you look at their symptoms, constant checking, a lot of comparison with people around. Eating disorders are on the rise. We also see increased levels of loneliness, poor communication, social withdrawal, and isolation. You put a bunch of youngsters now out there, their communication level seems to be challenged, right? So, in terms of diagnosis, clinical conditions, we are seeing that rise. We also see the different signs and symptoms of how it's affecting us.
Priyanka, of course, like we know that there are a lot of harms of social media, right? I mean, you must see it in your practice constantly. Parents coming in, kids coming in with host of issues, right? But does a ban really resolve those issues? That is a question. It's like telling a toddler not to touch the fire, and the toddler wants to touch the fire, right? That sort of thing. So does it really work? And also, in smaller cities, towns, social media is also a mean to socialize for a lot of these kids, right, who might be isolated otherwise. And that is exactly what Apar was also referring to, the three girls who did not have any community at all because the father had kept them inside the house the entire time, so they had no contact with the outside world, right? And social media is the one that sort of became their safe haven. So, does it really resolve an issue from a psychologist's perspective?
I do think we've all been through those hormonal stages, and prohibition does not work with adolescents. Let's be real about it, right? When you're going to prohibit something, um, you're going to increase the amount of leading to secrecy, alternative accounts. They are going to find ways of how to cheat around this, right? So prohibition doesn't work with the adolescent group, right? You're going to find more rebellious ways and more corrupt ways of how they're going to approach this. That is A. Answering the other point of connectivity. Now, why do we want to be on social platforms? We want to stay connected. We want to belong to a community. We want to be relevant. We want to be seen, right? And now, if we're going to cut this down, what is the other side of it? Creativity is going to come down, right? They're not going to feel being a part of a social community, which is one of the most essential aspects of the growing age. Am I connected? Who do I belong to? Who are my friends? Especially when we look at the Erikson stages of development, the teenage years are the ones that we're talking about role versus identity confusion. What is my role and who do I identify with? So, friendships become a very essential aspect of social, emotional, psychological development. Right? So, we may want to really think about ban versus taking responsibility. Right? And it's going to be an everlasting debate. The number of clients, the number of cases, especially post COVID, have increased so much. Parents walk in literally crying. Why? Because of cyberbullying cases, right? Umpteen number of cases where we see young women caught up in the traps of having shared censored pictures, being a trap of, paying money, being bullied, sharing photos, having morphed photos, videos, threatening. all of that has only increased over the period. We actually see that research says that 40%, 41% and more increase in the track rate of online harassment. So it is concerning. I think it's an important question for us to talk about, work on, debate on, and see more measurable outcomes than just a ban. But it's an important question to answer.
And just following up on that, and this is a question to you both, right? Priyanka, you from a psychologist perspective, and Apart, you from a very legal perspective as well. So, and a policy one as well. So, if not a ban, what other option do we have? Are there more feasible options than a blanket ban? Perhaps regulation, perhaps some other sort of restrictions. So, what are the ways that we can go about this? Because it is a real problem. So we cannot discount the fact that social media does not harm the kids, right? But and there has to be something in place. But what is that something if not a ban? Either of you can go.
Law should
Apart,
be
go
seen
ahead.
as a law should be seen as a measure of last resort, especially when it comes to the individual choices of people to maintain a scope of possibility for individual choice to be existing. So I don't think so. The union government or state governments have undertaken a large or a public campaign for messaging around the risks of social media, how to use it mindfully. I think so. There can be while I'm not familiar with the curriculum of the schools of the government schools, possibly going beyond digital etiquette and hygiene to also teaching what you should use, when you should use, what are the risks which emerge, empowering parents, having those kind of conversations. Parents are the primary guardians, custodians, decision makers in a household, right? The children may be able to figure out a smartphone and some money for high speed internet, but they won't be able to use it if the parents themselves uh, have a much deeper conversation, emphasize it, and quite often they themselves are not creating Instagram pages for their children, which there also happens, right? So I think so. Law should be approached when other policy measures fail, when other interventions fail. And what can the law do? It's not as if law does not have a function. I think so. The addictiveness of social media goes down to why these companies exist. Companies, by their very nature, want to grow their revenues. And the business model for social media is to gather more and more personal information about each user. And they can gather more information about us, not only based on the sensors or the kind of technology which is there on the platform or the smartphone, but also how much time we spend on it, which is why there are design features which are engineered, such as infinite scroll, which rob us of our perception of time. 15 minutes spends like 5 seconds. This is all due to design. And again, here law can be designed that these interventions are targeted. I have primarily written quite often that there is a need for law to look at the economic incentives rather than and the system design rather than looking at banning. I think those are smarter solutions. I think there are benefits which also accrue from social media, and it's like food, right? You have to watch what you're eating, when you're eating, how much you are eating. And I would disagree with people who will say that social media is just poison. It's not poison. It's also food in some ways, but it can turn into junk.
Yeah, absolutely. And Priyanka, what are your thoughts on, especially from a psychologist's perspective, what do you think what works? I mean, I think, of course, in your practice also, you must have suggested parents, right, whose kids have perhaps like social media addiction or are facing issues on social media. You must have suggested them ways how to cope with it or alternative ways that, they can overcome such an addiction. So, what are those ways, and perhaps that could work better than a ban?
Digital literacy, right? Workshops, programs, more conversations around digital literacy. How much is too much, right? That is the communication that you want to have from different stakeholders. The responsibility is not that of one, I think it is collaborative. Whether it is your social media platform, whether it is schools, parents' involvement, and the individual themselves, right? So all the other stakeholders involved need to take the responsibility. And what does that look like? Thinking about safeguarding mechanisms simply because adolescents, teens may not have the ability to regulate their emotions or the ability to manage misinformation, right? Education becomes a very primary aspect here. Parental involvement. Instead of just a helicopter parent where you're just on your children and scrutinizing everything they're seeing, sharing, very funnily, my cousin told me this thing that because you're a psychologist, I want to share this with you. I don't know if this is of trouble, but my eighth standard son, he's talking to other girls. Am I supposed to be like, oh my God, I can't believe my son is talking? Or am I supposed to restrict him immediately? I said, first and foremost, why do you even have access to his WhatsApp? Right? So we see parents becoming on the extremes. There are different kind of parenting styles, and you may want to identify what kind are you. Are you the negligent one? Are you the authoritarian, the authoritative, or the helicopter parent, where you're running after your child? So the first analysis is a self-reflection for parents here. Why is my child resorting to different mechanisms of stimulation, and when and why and how, right? So regulation is the key word here. So if parents are more educated about uh, you know appropriate value systems, introduction to the harm of using digital world, and I'm sure in today's world children sort of teach us saying that, you know what, don't give this OTP, don't talk to this person, why is my parent on WhatsApp and on Instagram more often, right? So they are sort of educated, so you need to regulate, you need to guide them instead of questioning them. So, what kind of a parenting style you're choosing and how you're accommodating their needs and requirements while regulation, that becomes important. A simple technique that we use is called the token economy system. Right? With every good behavior and achieved behavior, mutually spoken about, you get a reward. You get a star on your chart, right? And when you have a bad or disobedient behavior, you have 2 stars minus, right? So in these methods, how can you introduce rules? How can you introduce values into the system by making it also a fun and engaging system? Right? Know your child's friends. Very, very important. If you're going to say, don't talk to this person, they are going to talk to this person, but just not tell you. Right? So, how can you know them better? Why are they talking? Understand your child. Have conversations with your children, right? And now they've taken away her phone. She doesn't want to go to school. She's isolating from everybody. She's throwing tantrums. She's threatening them to harm them herself as well, right? So know your child becomes very important. Know your parenting style, and most importantly, get to know their friends. This is what parents can start with. With children, I'm sure there's a lot of dysregulation of emotions at this time. You're just developing your identity, but knowing the harmful impact it can create in terms of your identity, right? Know your friends, and you're nothing but the average of the 5 people you kind of hang out with the most. Right? So educating them about it becomes important. Schools have started to play a very important role of late. We've often seen we do quite a lot of workshops at schools, right? Starting from grade 3 till grade 12, schools are encouraging this conversation around bullying, cyberbullying, how to stand up for yourself, who do you report to, what are the helplines that you can reach out to, and if you find a friend in distress. So it's not just about educating the students. What is also important is how do you support a friend in need, right? If a friend has been caught up in a situation where somebody is harassing them, asking them for money, pictures, whatever kind of a situation, right? Educating your friends becomes important. And it's a collective role that we've got to play, rather than who is to blame and who is only responsible for this situation. Right? So, again, the key word is digital literacy. Keep yourself informed and inform those around you.
All right, thank you so much, Priyanka. One last question that I again have to you both is that, of course, hypothetically speaking, and I think it's also going to happen eventually, that a ban is enforced, right? And we have heard that even the minister talking about it, Ashwini Vaishnav, he announced at the AI summit that they are actually planning a ban on social media for under 16 nationwide. We are also seeing a lot of other countries. Australia has already done it. France is going to do it. They are conducting a study. UK is also, thinking of doing something similar. So a lot of countries are effectively planning to do it this year, right? So when a ban like this is in place, apart from you again, from a policy and a legal perspective, because usually these do require in India perhaps a KYC or age verification system, so some kind of data that you have to eventually give to the companies so that they can verify your age, right? And we also give it to perhaps like external, we outsource it, the government outsources such things, right, to a company like TCS perhaps or whatever. So they essentially store our data then, and it's also the data of the kids, right, because they are verifying a kid's age. So from that perspective, how secure are we? Because I was also reading this piece where I think over 100 or 400 scientists have signed that there shouldn't be age verification because it harms privacy. So from a privacy perspective, what are the harms that we can see? And Priyanka, again from you, like what are the alternative ways that a kid then goes about, where do they seek solace if not on social media? Because social media can still be regulated by parents, there can still be a watch on on the kids, right? But if they go out and about and meet strangers, talk to strangers, there is lesser regulation there. So again, like how if the social media ban happens, what do the kids do? So apart, if you want to go first, you can go first, and then Priyanka. Yeah.
A social media ban will satisfy a sense of moral panic. It won't fix the uh, broader problem which we are trying to address, which is both the mental health impacts as well as the impacts on critical thinking of younger people, which is coming through certain scientific studies. Look, firstly, there's a lack of longitudinal studies in India. I would support long term research which is done, which is publicly funded by the government, and can be carried out by researchers, psychologists, academics. Also, center young people's voices. What are their concerns? And then honestly address it through law, but also through providing them the opportunities that they need to do better in life. The second thing I'd like to highlight is that if we are just looking at social media, again, I'll go back to it. What is social media? Do we also include a chat GPT or a Claude within it? Because there are studies which have come, which are both brain mapping as well as survey based, that critical thinking is impacted if you offload your entire work to a LLM. And over a period of time, it impacts your neural plasticity. So shouldn't be there a minimum age for using LLMs when we are going so hoo-ha about integration of AI into each aspect of our life? What about the children then? What about the mental health impacts there? And are there no instances of children also taking steps against their own interest, engaging in self-harm after chatting with a chatbot? It is happening, right? So I would like our governments to take a step back, even if we want to draw some lessons from Australia, at least set up a dedicated regulatory institution rather being driven by the incentives of doing something or doing announcing something and then asking the bureaucrats to figure it out.
Absolutely, Apar. Priyanka, what about you?
I think it's the larger question that we need to answer. Is it social media again, or is it digital usage? um, it's not a lot of time gap between where clients today walk and saying, "Oh, I already spoke about that in ChatGPT." Right? ChatGPT told me this about me. Oh, I did my journaling there already, but it actually told me about my attachment pattern. Yeah, these are things we want to ask ourselves, and the impact it has on our brain functioning, like our emotional regulatory system, like the amygdala, the reward functioning, our our prefrontal cortex. Are we able to make adequate decisions ourselves through these usage? Every time I have a problem, if I'm going to go to one of these platforms, look at what others are doing and compare my life and my identity over it, versus also going to, like Apar said, the LLM platforms and actually checking in on myself instead of actually talking to a real human and resolve the issue. Right? So we have larger questions that we want to ask ourselves here. Uh, Social media is one aspect. Now, how are we going to regulate between connectivity versus regulating the usage of time we spend on it are important questions. As simple as the blue light that we're going to be exposing ourselves to day in and day out is going to keep our brains so alert during situations that it's actually changing our nervous system regulation. We're almost in this fight and flight mode in terms of urgency and lack of impulse control because we want immediate gratification. Right? The ban on, the 10-minute delivery system, right? The gratification of I need it here and now, and it starts with us. And if we're able to work on it, I think eventually the children will also understand a similar system, right? So on the other side, what can we do more proactively? Because it's an ongoing debate. Mental health screening, mental health checkups in schools, have more counselors available, do a screening of children who are at high risk, like cyberbullying, children whose behaviors have changed over a period of time, which means increased irritability, lack of compliance, behavioral addictions, low social connection, and most importantly, lower academic performance. Right? We've seen a direct correlation between the two. Somebody who submits an assignment over a chat GPT assignment versus somebody who's actually putting in the effort to do so. Right? So, how and where are you going to regulate? These are the important areas. So, if you're finding the signs and symptoms in your child or a peer around you, it's about time we asked each other, "Are we okay?" And probably parents getting together and talking about it a lot more. So, mental health check-ins are extremely important. Have screening, and that's where we can start.
All right. I know we started with the teens, but I think all of us are beginning to question ourselves whether we have the same problems as well. So, all right. Thank you so much, Apar. Thank you so much, Priyanka, for sharing your time and your insights with us. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, brother.